Hola, Bernardo's. Good morning. I'm trying to walk you through the steps I think today that will be part of your writing and submission process online. Bear with me as I go through this. This is going to be really ratchety as I try this, but I've written some prompts for Q1 and I'm using some old stuff for Q2. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the terminology, it's probably because you haven't watched one of the videos yet. So before going on, I would highly recommend that you go back to some of the videos about this 2020 exam and just kind of revisit all the language, okay? Q1 is the long question, and I'm expecting that it'll either have 6 or 7 task points. Q2 is the kind of question that we've been doing all year long on continuity and change, and I think we're going to have about 5 points on that one, okay? So I'm going to kind of hang here with you and walk you through what I think is going to happen. There's been a lot of information that popped up on Thursday. And since then, I've been kind of brainstorming, actually dreaming about how I can like do the same thing with you ahead of time. College Board is planning on having a trial run, but that won't happen for like a week. And that's just too late for us to wait to start practice writing. So I'm going to go ahead with it this morning based on everything that we know. All right. So I have given you guys like this assignment, and I'm giving you prompts here as I make the how-to video to fill in this space. I'm going to navigate to that assignment. Just pretend like this is you logging in to AP Classroom with all of your login information. Mr. J is like getting or navigating to the website, right? So I know I'll probably have to go back to modules. I think the assignment is like 2020 practice with Mr. J or something like that. So this is just you making sure you're ready. Now on exam day, I want you doing all of this at around 10:30. Okay, your exam is at 11 on I think it's the 15th. So we want to make sure that, you know, if you're going to print, your printer's up and running. If you're using your laptop, which I highly recommend, you have it plugged up and or charged. All of the technology you plan to use on exam day, you got to have it ready the night before. Okay, so just put that in your to-do list for that day. All right, here we go. We're navigating on pretend AP Classroom. I am looking for, there it is, 2020 AP exam prompt. Here we go. All right. So I click on this thing and it opens up as like a quiz. So I want you to know that what you're actually doing is not an assignment. It's a quiz on Canvas. And that allows me to put here a timer for you so that you can practice, you know, printing the thing off, practice how long is it going to take to access documents, practice submitting, practice typing up whatever your response is going to be, or writing it on paper and, you know, taking a picture and sending it back as a file. But the only way you can complete this quiz, guys, is as a file upload, and I didn't like restrict, the file type. So you can do Microsoft Word, you can do Google Docs, or you can handwrite it and turn it in the way this thing is set up. Now, I want you to practice a couple of different times, a couple of different ways so that you can find essentially what you're most convenient with. Sorry, I'm a telemarketer who always calls in the middle of these videos, right? Basically, I want you to practice a couple of times with this, all right? So every day of the week, I'm going to be uploading another practice run for you, okay? Now, it won't be as elaborate as this first time through, but this way it'll be like you know exactly what to expect. You're not, you know, experiencing it for the first time on the day of the exam. All right. Having said that, now I've got some instructions here, just like you'll have on the day of the AP. They'll probably remind you about cheating and all the other things. A note about that, guys, I have found out some new information. Some teachers apparently have been copying the information, I mean, literally copying and pasting the information off Khan Academy right into the notes that they share digitally with their students. Now, what? Now that this is an online exam, you have to kind of consider that as cheating. If you use those kinds of notes that you've made for yourself digitally, we're not supposed to access any of that stuff. So I'm hoping that you have continued to take your notes, you know, the old-fashioned way on paper, because you can have those spread out behind you on your bed as you're working or on your bed as you're working, and it won't be a problem. It's just that if you navigate away from the prompt as it's going, it might put a red flag on your submission, and we just want to avoid all those hassles, okay? So Plus, you've only got 25 minutes. You don't have time to like Google search new information or go back to Khan Academy to pull this thing together. You need to spend your time thinking about the writing. Okay. So here I have a reminder. You guys can see this is a timed quiz. Q1 is timed at 30 minutes, 25 for writing, 5 for submitting, while Q2 is timed at 20 minutes, 15 for writing, 5 for submitting. All right. Number 2, it says your answer will be a file upload for each question. You will not be able to return to Q1 after you submit. I want to remind you guys that as you are writing these, Q1 and Q2, they can't be in the same document. You have to submit for Q1 and you have to submit for Q2. So when you open whatever it is you want to type in or whatever it is you want to write in, you need to treat these as separate tasks, okay? If I scroll down in my notes to myself, number 3, the practice prompts you see here are for your convenience this first time through. They will not show up on exam day before the timer begins, okay? So I know some of you are having challenges with printing, so I've made a Google Slides of exactly the same prompts. Inside the Google Slides for you are all those icons that I introduced in previous videos about compare or contrast or compare and or contrast. As well as boxes for you to just kind of think it through. Okay, I still think that if you're not writing anything, you need to go through the process of thinking through a flow chart for yourself, because that'll make it a lot easier to write this sucker and not get distracted by the technology and everything, and be able to kind of make sure that you've gotten everything done on your checklist. Okay. So looking here now, number 4, you're advised to keep a browser window open for the prompt and a separate window for typing up your response in Google Docs or Word. That way you don't overlook the timer as you begin to write. Okay, so guys, you can see on my screen up here at the top right, I like to use tabbed browsing a lot. But on an exam day, I would not just open this in another tab, because that's going to hide the timer. You won't be able to see the timer, right? And you want to make sure that you are fully aware of that timer. Guys, they're going to be stringent on this thing. They will cut it off after 30 minutes, 25 for writing and 5 minutes for submitting. So you have to follow through with that, or your response is not even going to be scored. Okay. For that reason, too, I would highly suggest that you not plan to sign up for a makeup exam if there is a problem like that, or College Board takes way too much time to download the information for you. Then you always have that makeup exam as a backup. But if the makeup exam is your first time, then any problems that you have at home, they're just not going to care. So that's unfortunate, but let's make sure that we're taking the exam at the time it's been planned, okay? All right, so what else is here? Number 5, for this first practice run, you'll be able to submit up to 3 times. In case there was a problem on exam day, you only get 1 submission. And for the timed writing practice that I put together for you moving forward, after this first try, I'm not going to give you 3 times. Okay, you submit once, timer goes off, that's it. Okay, but we're going to do so many of them, guys. If you have one go bad, don't worry. Right now, grades are not something you should be worried about. It's just getting the practice in for doing well on AP exam day. Okay. All right, so we're ready now. We've read all of College Board's crud. We've checked our boxes. We're ready to do this. I'm ready to take this sucker. Okay, so how do I do that? All right, I can preview it with you. Maybe that will be the best way. I probably should have logged in with Student View. So let me do that. Let's do that. I'm going to go to Settings. I want to see what you see. It'll take a little time for this basically to set up, but let's see. All right, so we will just take this like a test student, okay? So I got to navigate back to that stuff. This is still part of the prep. See why you want to log in at 10:30, right? You don't know the steps that it could take, and the exam starts at 11. So we got to get to where we need to be, okay? Canvas has been super slow this morning, so uploading anything might take you longer than normal. That's great for practice on exam day, because we just don't know what we're going to be facing. All right, there it is. Now I'm in. This quiz is locked. Oh, fantastic. See, I need to unlock the exam, and then we can take a look at it. So let me pause the video, guys, and I will come right back to you, okay? Okay, guys, so I'm back. I've had some time to think this through. If I go through on student view, it's not going to let me see my Google Docs because my test student doesn't have a Google Drive account with Carroll ISD. So you wouldn't be able to see anything. I'm just going to preview this with you, so it might look a little bit different than what you might see on the day of your practice test or whatever. It's complicated. We'll just move forward. Okay, so here's the preview, and it tells me once you've submitted an answer, you will not be able to change it later. You will not be able to view the previous question again. Okay. All right, so we're ready to begin, and this is just a practice run. Okay, I've got all those instructions again. Here is question one, and just like I thought, Canvas is taking its own sweet time and loading this. Okay, so let's just pretend that College Board has 25,000 AP Art History exam testers, and it took a little time for us to get our prompt, but here it is slowly. I'm hoping it'll come up shortly. Okay, our timer's going up there. We've taken 30 seconds, so it's cool. Calm down. I'm going to take a little time to access this document because everybody wants it at the same time. So I just fold my arms and I wait on College Board. Okay. My little note down at the bottom says waiting for Google Drive. So yay, there it is. Okay, so if I'm doing this on the day of the test, I want to probably print this thing. So you might click on this, click on your printer. I want to be able to do it again. I want to be able to basically annotate online. That's something else I'm going to model for you here. I want to move my face out of the way. There we go. And print. Okay, so as soon as I have this thing in my hand, I am ready to begin. I'm going to close out of this just for convenience sake, and I'm going to set up while I'm waiting on my printer. Okay, there's my timer. It's running at the bottom. I want to set up my Microsoft Word document. Probably should have done this ahead of time, right? Because that's going to be a whole nother creature. So let me move my face down here, and I think my document's set up. I want you guys to keep 1 inch margins, okay? I want you to double space your answer, so I need 2 lines there. Okay, you're also going to skip a space in between each prompt, and I'm going to give you some bonus points if you can show me your annotations that you're doing. So, okay, here's my printer. Here's my prompts. Okay, in just a second, I'll annotate this with you online, actually in the video, and that will be the process that we use to move forward. Okay, so let me pause the video once more, and I'll pick up in just a second where I left off. Okay, where's that Screencastify? Oh, guy. There it is. All right, so I'm pausing this. I'll be right back. All right, so guys, I have tried to print off my prompt, and now I'm focusing in on the text of the question here as we try to figure out what it is we're going to need to do. This is just for me to use, guys. I wrote this question. It may not be the best question in the world, but it kind of mimics the format that I think that we're going to see on the day of the AP. So it may not be the best thing we have, but we're going to move ahead and use it anyway. Okay. All right. So I think you guys can see I'm here working on my desk. I've got my prompt. I printed off from College Board. And now I'm going to go through the steps of marking the prompt first, and then I'm going to carry you through the steps of blocking the prompt. So this long essay, which is like more than half of what your AP grade is worth, going to be pretty important, okay, that we look at every part of it. So we've got the image of the grave stele of Gesso at the top, right? You can barely see it here, but it starts off by talking about it here. Artworks often communicate societal concepts of death and the afterlife in order to suit a specific patron's needs. Very first step that we want to do, guys, is bracket off information that is not tied to earning a specific task. So right away, that's just basically telling me about the theme of the death and the afterlife, right? This is what my artworks have been selected for and what they're going to tell me about. So I've already got that in my head. Now, having done these a million times before, I know this list down here, there's not going to be a task associated with that. But if you do this, this lets Mr. J know that you have read through the options and considered them. It's very, very important, I think, this year that you stick to the list. Primarily because these have been vetted to give you all of your points. Now, in the emergency situation where you do not know any of these works, then it might be a good idea to use something you do know, and that can come from any other relevant image, right? But let's talk a little bit more about this prompt. Okay, so we bracketed in step 1 the things that are not tied to a task. There may be some more of this to do. If you look at the identification here, it says the work shown is a piece from the required course content. Select and identify another work that conveys societal ideas about the concepts of death and the afterlife. You may choose from the list below or any of the relevant work from the ancient Mediterranean. Okay, anything outside of this content area, they're not going to let us talk about on this question. Now, that might happen to you, so just pay attention to that if they tell you specifically where to go. If I'm going to talk about, say, Goya at this point, I'm not getting any credit for this question beyond what I talk about for what they assigned in that image, okay? Chances are your phrase here is going to read like you may choose from the list below or any other relevant work, period. But I wanted to throw you a curveball to make sure you were paying attention, okay? All right, so this year, 2020, we're not getting any credit for identification. They're saying basically, since you've got your list of required course content for Mr. J, it's too easy for you just to simply pick one and completely identify. So they are not looking at any of this stuff to give you points. I bet our to-do stuff is going to be down here, okay? So with that information bracketed, my next suggestion would be to circle the verbs: describe, explain. Okay, explain. And we have a question here. Here, we're going to be answering this question with like an implied because, and that's kind of like an implied explain. We got to answer this question. So why do the artists for these works engage concepts of death and the afterlife? My verb is kind of an implied explain, right? I got to explain an answer to this. Okay. So use specific content. Okay, so I think that's basically all the verbs I'm going to find. Now it's time to connect those or write down those connector words. So I want to go back to where, okay, obviously College Board put these in front of me. So I want to make sure I'm talking about both artworks every time I do it, right? And there's another one down here that's not all bolded yet. So they sneaked one in on me there. I like to use the word each a lot. That's a connector word between the artworks. I think beyond that, that's pretty much everything in the prompt that would connect the two artworks together. Now it's time to underline the key phrases that tell me what on earth they're looking for each of the task points. So I'm just going to go back through this where I've highlighted or circled a verb. I know there's going to be a phrase that tells me what to do with the verb. Describe what? Well, the visual characteristics that convey society's views about death and the afterlife. Okay, so now I know what I have to describe in each of the works, right? Let's go to the next one. From both work, explain one difference in how the artist engages concepts of death and the afterlife. So I know I've got a difference about death and the afterlife. The next one, I have a similarity about how these works engage concepts of death and afterlife. The last question, I got to answer, why do artists, okay, so why do they do this to fulfill a patron's needs? I'm going to underline that whole sentence. Okay, that's a big question. And then I'm reminded here, the next thing I've got to do, if we bracketed information, we've circled our verbs, even ones that might be implied. We've done connector words, and underlined key phrases. Now we got to figure out, how do I earn credit for each one of these points? All right, let's go back to the first part here. Describe the visual characteristics. Guys, that is VE, right? With VE. And to be specific about visual stuff, that's what you see in your picture up here. And that could relate to subject matter or content, the what that we see in the picture, or the form, the composition, or anything that has to do with the elements of art or the principles of design, right? Balance, symmetry, color, texture. How are those things used to convey views about the afterlife? Okay, so because it's a description, I want to remind you guys about the magic of 3. You got to come up with 3 pieces of either content or 3 pieces of visual evidence in order to really fully earn that point. And that was something that we learned last year at the reading. You can't just say one thing and expect people to know that you know the artwork and all its details. Okay, so that's why we're using the magic of 3. Let's move on. What other things do we have to use in order to earn these points? Well, there, the beginning phrase I see with VE again. We're talking about a lot of visual evidence in this prompt. Look, it shows up again. So if I start talking about function or history, I'm not going to get those rubric points. Look down here. This is where I get to do that. Okay. Contextual evidence, you guys remember, we're talking about function. We're talking about the historical context, and that could include political, economic, or social ideas tied to the artworks. So while this is partly to review how to block, this is also partly to review what those words are, just so you're clear as you get ready to practice on several more of these. Okay, I think we're ready now to label our task points, right? And they start right here with describe. Describe both works. That means I've probably got 2 task points. The visual characteristics that convey society's views about death and the afterlife. I bet we have to do that, and I hope I can see this over here. Whoops. Basically, that's going to be my T1 and my T2 description boxes, right? Dot, dot, dot. There they are. Down below, I've got explain one difference. I bet you that's my T3. Explain one similarity. I bet that's T4. All right. And then my question, I think, I think to answer the question, we need to set aside a T5, right? And because I've got to use specific contextual evidence from both works in your response, we're going to have like a T6 and a T7, like one for the selected work and one for the required work. Okay, so you see this lined up as like a 7-pointer. You might have a 6-pointer, and I think that's really the way they're going to go. Regardless of where they lay the rubric points, guys, we've kind of covered our bases in all the parts of the question. And as long as you answer all the parts of the question, you're going to earn all the available rubric points, right? So 6 points, 7 points, who cares? Ultimately, we're just making sure we've got everything marked out the way that we want. Now, to slide my document camera away from the question to the blank side of my page, and we're just going to mark this out. This is the blocking part of what I would want you to do. And I'm doing it way slower. It'll take you a lot less time to figure this out. I'm starting with T1 and T2. T1 and T2 are description points. I just need a box and a place to describe what I want to say about T1, T2. What are the visual details that are tied to death and the afterlife? If I were using the Gravestale of Agesso, I would want to talk about the somber mood, her facial features that show, no expression, almost a sadness in the tone. I might add in there the discussion of what she's looking at in that picture, the jewelry and her dowry. I might even imagine the convention of that box that usually marked a person who was deceased and no longer on the planet as something that really alludes to Greek societal views about death and the afterlife. Now, you might choose a sarcophagus, the coffin, or the battle sarcophagus, so it depends on what you say about it over here. But these bullet points remind me, I'm going to try as best I can to get those 3 things done, okay? All right, so moving on now to T3, this is where we explain one difference. I've got arrows going in different directions here around a similar idea, right? So this is what I would say is my T3. Okay, I got to talk about both of those works at the same time with visual evidence. So it might go something like this. While the Gravestale of Agesso demonstrates societal ideas of death and the afterlife one way, yada, 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 the other selected work, whether it's the Ludovisi Battle Sarcophagus or whatever, is going to do this a little bit differently. Okay, so I want you to see this is really one task that's shared between 2 works. Okay, using specific visual evidence. Moving on now, explain a similarity. Now my arrows have flipped and they're coming into each other, right? and they kind of share the idea in similar fashion. You might say about this Grave Stele of Egesso, we see actually an image of the deceased, right? You see that in the Ludovisi battle sarcophagus. You see both the wife and the husband on the sarcophagus of the spouses. So there will be something that's similar between the two, even though it may seem kind of basic to you. Okay, but it gets the job done. So there we go with T number 4. Explain why, answer that question. This is the shape that we drew, if you guys remember. I'm going to have to adjust my camera a little bit here. Triangle, right? Where you answer the question for T5, and then you supply evidence, and this time it's contextual evidence with both of those works, T6, T7, okay? I want to go back and really remind myself, how do I earn these points? This is going to be all VE. Okay. These two things have to be VE. These two things need to be VE. Okay. I mean, all of this, guys, we basically can see inside the pictures that we have in our minds. The triangle at the bottom, that's the history that we don't see in the artwork, contextual evidence, right? So here I'm going to answer my question, and here I'm going to supply lots of rich CE to make sure I get those points around that shared idea. Can you guys see that? Boom. Okay. So this is the kind of annotation that I think is really, really helpful. It's helpful for me to make sure that I've got the architecture of the question quite right. And that makes sure that my essay will be built the same way. So I just wanted to demonstrate that with you, and I'll do it for both questions here. This was what I call marking the prompt. This is what I call blocking the prompt. And you're only going to do that with Q1, the long essay, okay? For the shorter questions, all we need to do is marking. So that's going to go a lot faster for you. And I just wanted you to see what that was all about, okay? So we'll move on and move on with the demonstration. Thanks. All right, guys. One thing that I thought about here that I just want to kind of reiterate with you as you're practicing this first run through, there will be an option for you to enter text right there on the page wherever the prompt is going to show up. Now, that is totally an option for you if you don't want to do all of this printing off and annotating and stuff. But I do think the annotation, the marking the prompt, and the blocking the prompt have shown to be proven ways to do well in the exam. So I think it's going to be good practice for you to go through the steps of, annotating the prompt, marking it up, thinking it through before you get ready to write, regardless of whatever text entry or file upload you decide to do. So please promise me that you'll try these strategies. Essentially, if you practice them, it may get to the point where you're able to kind of visualize them in your head, and that'll make your process go faster. But I want you to be encouraged. You're going to have the time that you need to write about what you need to write. Let's just make sure that we lay the groundwork for success on that one, okay? All right, guys, so we have annotated our prompt on paper. It's sitting over here beside my laptop. I think I'm ready to kind of use that as a guide as I get ready to type this thing up in Word. So I'm just going to blindly task point some things here. Let's say I'm going to talk about task point 1 first. Okay, so you wouldn't type this. This is where you would type your response, blah, blah, blah. But this is just to give you kind of an idea of what you would do as you get ready, right? Point 3, task point 4. Don't type this in, okay? I just have nothing else to say because this could be any prompt in the world. Task point 4, task point 5, task point 6. Maybe there's a task point 7. I just better read my prompt very carefully. Okay, this is totally BS, right? Okay, so instead of what you're seeing here, what is that ampersand there? What you're seeing here, guys, is basically something that would allow you to go, okay, for task point number 1, I want to say this, describe blah, 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 okay? So I'm going to need to save this document. So I'll save as browse on my desktop where I can find it nice and easy. This is my 2020 exam response, whatever. I mean, you can just save it by your name, right? I'll put Johnston, okay? And it's a Word document. So once I save that, then I'm kind of ready to submit, okay? So here's where you don't want to click Submit Quiz. You want to go to Choose File. And there on the desktop, you guys can see my response. I open it, connect it. Now I'm ready to go to the next question. I get the reminder, hey, you sure you want to leave it blank? What? Okay, you can't come back to this question once you hit next. Are you sure you want to leave it blank? I thought I did that already. Okay, cancel. Let's see here. Choose file. Oh, okay. I forgot, guys. Because I'm in preview mode, I found out Saturday night, it won't show me that the file has been attached. So I'm not going to be able to demonstrate that part of it with you. What you will see is your file name pop up right here. Once it's been submitted, it'll say, thank you for submitting your response, and then you're ready to go on to the next question. So there's just no way I can demonstrate that part of this for you. That's why we're practicing this thing like 3 or 4 times, okay? So it's going to tell me, hey, buddy, you left it blank. In reality, I would have submitted by now, okay? I'm going to click OK so we can go on with the quiz. Now we can see my instructions again, and this is the 5-point task Q2. This is the continuity and change question, and we're going to be doing some activities basically to look at trends over time. So, it's been challenging. You guys are learning new information, right, about Content Area 4. We're having to review the old information from Content Area 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And we're also having to learn this thing on how to write. So we've got like a 3-pronged attack going on in here in our APR history. So I appreciate you guys sticking in there and doing all this hard work. Okay. All right. I totally ripped this off the exam from 2017. And you guys can see this is the Grand Odalisque question that I've shown you before in a previous PowerPoint. So we would do the same thing. We would want to hey, I want to print that thing. I am hoping that if they're going to have an image, that they put the image somewhere that's convenient to print. You guys, you might only have like the writing. Either way, get what you need to annotate. Okay, so I'm going to print this to my printer, see how much time that takes, and then use that as kind of a model. Now, while that's printing, I'm going to go over here and close this file because I do not want to use the same file that I did for my first question. I want a new file, okay? So maybe we can use this time to do a file, save as to the desktop. This is Q2, my Q2. Okay. Response. I think it might be a good idea for you to put your last name with your response in case there's a problem. So now I'm set up to do some annotating, and I will annotate that with you and then bring you back here in just a second. Okay. All right, so guys, we're ready for Q2 here. This is actually question 5 from the 2017 exam, and I'm using it because it was the continuity and change question for that year. We'll just go through this and do the same kind of marking the text that I would expect you to do if you were doing this on paper here. Basically, I want you to know that we're not going to do blocking for this short question. It's only 5 task points, and as long as we know where they are in the question, then we're going to be fine for this, okay? So let me get my camera here. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. Let's read through this together. The painting shown is Le Grand Odalisque by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ang, completed in 1814 CE and first exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1819 CE. Okay, so we know right off the bat, this is the information to warm up our brains, right? And we have the image down below. I mean, we could bracket that if we want to, but I think everything else is going to be tied to a task. So we'll go through this, and I want to describe, explain, yada, 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 explain, and explain. Okay, lots of explaining to do here. So let's back it up and take a look here. Describe at least 2 visual characteristics of Ang's representation of the female nude. Okay, this is where we've got to start boxing connector words, right? I think at least 2. If it's underlined by College Board, I really want to point that out. Do I see any more boths? No, I don't see any more like and. Anything else that's underlined here? Nah, we're good to go. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to do whatever that is 2 times, and these will be the next 3. So let's look at it. Describe at least 2 visual characteristics of Ong's representation of the female nude. Okay, so we're looking literally at the figure. We're not going to talk about the background because it has nothing to do with the task at hand there. Okay. Explain how Legrand Odalisque demonstrates established traditions and representations of the female nude. I think I like that phrase. Explain how Legrand Odalisque demonstrates changes from established traditions. Look at there. Okay, how it's like the past and how it's like stuff coming up in the future, right? How is this a hybrid work that looks backward and also looks forward? All right, moving on. Using specific contextual evidence, explain why Ong deviated from. Oh, this is a why question. Okay, that's a pretty big, important thing. We were dealing with how, now they want why. That's going to have to be contextual. How or why Ong deviated from established traditions in his representation of the female nude. Okay, now what evidence is required? Well, take a look. There's VE. Let's annotate that. Okay, visual evidence again can be subject matter or form. We see it again here. Oh, look up here, visual characteristics. Okay, with VE. So we've got to use like the visual evidence here to answer those first points, right? Down at the bottom, we're going to get to talk about the history of the times, what was going on in Ong's world in France. So that's where you might say colonialism or the allure of the Orient, or you might talk about this being a work for the sister of Napoleon, Italy, right? That's the context of the history of the piece. All right, let's see if we can label now our points. Describe at least 2 visual characteristics of Ong's representation of the female nude. That's our T1. I hope you can see this, T1 and T2. Okay, using specific visual evidence, explain how Legrand Odalisque demonstrates established traditions. That's our T3 right there. Look at this. Explain how it demonstrates change. That's going to be T4. And then explain why Ong deviated. That's really our T5. Okay. So we can describe at least 2 characteristics. We're going to do that twice. We could say that she's elongated, right? We could say that she has a smooth finish to her skin. We could say any number of things here to describe at least 2 visual characteristics. I mean, there's a lot of there's a high degree of finish on the figure of the body. She's facing away from us. It's improbable that her hip could connect to that knee. And it's probably like going to be a longer back there, lots of vertebrae, right? Okay, so that's just examples of what we could do to describe the visual characteristics of this nude. Now, how does it demonstrate established tradition? This is connected to the Venus of Urbino, right? And the way the pose, the details of the background, the lush boudoir that we see the figure in. Explain how it demonstrates change. Okay, so we have a different position with her facing back. Normally the nude is facing forward. There's a high degree of finish on textures that was typical of Ong's ability to use line. We also have an oriental setting instead of a domestic setting. So there's any number of things we could say there, just thinking it through. Then explain why Ong deviated from established traditions in his representation of the female nude. This is, again, the history of what France is going through at the times, post-Napoleonic world. Any number of things we could say there, but at least now we know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're ready to write. Okay? Ooh. All right, guys, so we've annotated our 5-point task prompt. We're ready to kind of do some typing here. Again, you will type your answer here for T1, okay? You'll type whatever your answer here is for T2. Okay, you're going to do whatever you want to say, put it here. You're going to double space for me. You're going to skip spaces in between these things. So typing and talking is hard. I'm just having some fun this morning, okay? For T4, your answer here for T5. Whoops. All right, so let's say that I've typed up my response and I'm ready to submit. I'm going to go in here and do my file, save, and I've already done the save as, so this should just be updating my original document. I'm now ready to go in, and I wish I could model this part of it for you, but there's my Q2. I attach it. If this were actually your test file, guys, you would see the name of your file there. And once it was attached, you would get a note from me saying, thank you for submitting your response, okay? So my timer, have you guys noticed this? I'm gonna get rid of these screencastify tools. My timer has been clicking down. I don't know, Canvas's timer is really kind of minimal. If you had a full screen, it would be popping up in the upper right-hand corner. Right, the way I've got it right now, it's at the bottom of my page, and I hate that. But you're going to have to figure this out. How do you keep that timer in front of you as you're working on your document over here? Okay, that'll probably be the biggest challenge of having these two windows open. All right. So we are ready now. I've answered that question, blah, blah, blah. It's going to tell me, hey, you didn't finish this, but I'm going to go ahead and say submit this quiz, okay? Yeah, I know. This is only happening to Mr. J because he's not a student in the class, so we're going to say, okay, we're ready to go. I'm submitting this quiz, okay? That basically is the way this will go, and you can see we've got plenty of time on the clock. I'm going to go in and make this quiz. It's showing up as 30 minutes here. I'm going to give you the full time for both of these questions, so that will change. But this is basically the idea. So I hope that now you can kind of see it's going to involve some technology. The goal with all this practice, guys, is just simply to make sure that we are comfortable with whatever technology they throw at us, and that we're really spending the bulk of our time thinking about the writing, thinking about what we would like to say. So with that, I'll leave it there. I'm going to edit these videos together for you, so hopefully this will be our first dry run. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I'm going to get caught up on those content videos, don't worry. But I felt like I really needed to address this today. So thank you guys for your patience as we get this done. I'll talk to you more later. Bye for now.